My name is Babu Nair, and I am the publisher of Banking Frontiers magazine. And along with me is my colleague, Mr. Manoj Agarwal, who is the editor of the magazine. It is a pleasure to have all of you together here. Like most of the times when we have been having some very enrolling and very engaging discussions. So, data, digital, and disruption. He has tried to put together a very interesting concept called as a 3D economy. And the underlying factors of it is uh, that each of these aspects of 3D calls for a lot of agility amongst all the financial institutions. How agile is your organization to use this data? How agile is it to take advantage of the various opportunity that this data presents to you, the various dimension that this data presents to you is what we are going to discuss here. Over to you, Manoj.
Thank you very much. Good morning and welcome to all my panelists for today's discussion. We'll quickly jump into it and start with a round of introduction.
Thanks, Manoj. Morning, everyone, and thanks for Manoj for having us on the panel. My name is Harsh Chamria. I'm the Chief Digital Officer at Magma FinCorp Limited.
I'm Bertram D'Souza from Kotak Mahindra Bank. I look after digital payments and fintech partnerships.
Myself, Vinod Kumar. I'm CAO for Fino Payments Bank. Additional to the CAO role, I handle the admin and logistics, etc. for the bank.
Hi Manoj, thanks for having me on the panel, and hi everybody on the panel as well. Lovely to be here as part of this. My name is Vimal Venkatram. I'm the country manager India sales for Snowflake.
My name is Ranga Vasudevan. I'm the founder CEO of the Data Team, an AI specialist company.
This is Shivani. I head client insights for RBL Bank. I handle analytics, data, digital transformation projects across the bank. Wonderful to be here on the panel with all of these eminent panelists, and really looking forward to the discussion today.
My name is Vijay Kumar, and I'm Principal Officer and CEO of Go Digit General Insurance.
So let's start with our first question today. Given the explosion in the variety of data that is available today, how has your sector transformed itself? Okay, we're looking at the sectors from using data as a tool for efficiency, for increasing efficiency, to using data as a tool for creating a difference, a differential business advantage. Okay, and I think that's the evolution of data that we are seeing. So who can we start? Can we have someone from banking begin with? Yes, Bertram, let's hear you.
Great. So thanks, Manoj, for the question. I think it's a great one at this time. So from a bank's perspective, today banks obviously have the competitive advantage when it comes to data, just by the nature of the sheer volume of data and the quality and quantity of data that we have, be it demographic or transactional. I believe that the key of building successful digital products in this space has been to get deep insights from users. And this obviously stems from a good architecture around collection of data. It also stems from the fact of how this data is mined and translated into a framework to deliver key business outcomes. So for entities in the BFSI space today, I think primary 2-3 goals would be, how do we use digital to identify the right set of customers to acquire from an acquisition perspective? 2 is, how would we look at engaging the existing customers who are already with us? And a lot of that engagement would come from a deep understanding of what makes that customer tick. And 3 would be, if you understand enough about what the customer aspires to get in terms of next level of products and services, I think that's where digital plays a key role in delivering that native user experience to capture that user's attention and cross-sell and upsell effectively. So I think these are the 3 key areas which we have seen a majority of our focus across the banking sector. Okay. And data has always been our advantage.
That's true. Cool. Let's hear maybe from the insurance sector. We have Vijay.
Even before COVID also, I think a lot of digitalization has happened actually with regard to claim settlement, underwriting and policy issuance. Thanks to the association of OEMs who have done a lot of, especially on the motor side, I think they have also brought all the companies on the one platform, and I think a lot of use of technology has happened in the past. So whether with regard to assisting the partners in servicing the customers or servicing the claims. So technology has really helped the general insurance sectors to continue this growth path.
Great. Thank you, Vijay. Let me come to Harsh now. Harsh, how has the NBFC sector responded in terms of leveraging data from growth to transformation?
Sure, thanks, Manoj. So, Manoj, I'd say that the lending business, initially data analytics was used mostly to create lending scorecards, basis which credit underwriters could decide whether or not to give a loan to a customer. This creation of scorecard reduced the subjectivity in credit underwriting and hence increased the efficiency. But I think you rightly asked that, how is data analytics and data moving from efficiency to creating a differential advantage? So I think now, with the emergence of AI, ML, and other technologies, we actually have the ability to analyze unstructured and surrogate non-financial data in real time to create feedback loops. So this is benefiting the lending industry in two meaningful ways, I'd say. Number one, it has helped the entire industry expand the market to include the financially unincluded, new to credit and thin file customers who don't have a repayment history. And secondly, it has helped the lending decisions be very, very fast, thereby creating a shift from small number of large loans or small number of large transactions to a large number of small transactions, giving rise to an entire industry of cardless credit or credit on the fly. Particularly at Magma, we work with customers who are part of the informal economy. In fact, 85% of them don't have any ITR, and majority of them are either thin file or new to credit customers. So what our FOS do is that they actually capture alternate data, such as acreage of a farm for a farmer, or the alternate income of the family members, whether the wife or the kids are, tutors, or whether they're working in someone's house as a maid or a servant, electricity bill of a factory, routes that are applied by the truck drivers, and all of this data is populated into the LOS application on the FOS's smartphone. After which we have the data overlaid for the lookalike customers from the bureaus. Basis of this alternate data, we are able to take an instant decision, and in 2/3 of our lending decisions, the system is actually giving an output. So it's not a human who's taking a decision; the human is assisting the system decision. And by doing all of this, essentially we're creating a differential play for ourselves, because the self-employed, non-professional MSMEs in India don't get this credit on the fly experience yet. And therefore, I think the data analytics has helped us move from just efficient processing of data to actually expansion of the market as well. In fact, now we are looking to go direct to the customer with a sales application and direct to the channel who help us source the business to provide this instant decisioning on their smartphones itself.
The fact that data has enabled that is, I think, a fantastic example. I'm sure across sectors, people are, and not just financial sectors, across sectors, people are, organizations and sectors are leveraging data to be able to connect with more and more customers. Ranga, if I may come to you, do you see any other perspective on how data is being used for transformation and not just efficiency?
Yeah, certainly. I think the cross-industry view we get to see, being a partner for many of the institutions that we get to work with, is that it's not just the factual data that is, of course, very important. And these are things like KYC, which have always been collected by most people in the lending sector, especially, or in the insurance sector. But the fact that there is this added element to it, which is related to behaviors. And it's the behaviors which are invariably the hardest to pinpoint without data. And there's only so much that gut feel can, or intuition can get you to, right, in terms of a stage of maturity. And to get to that behaviors, it's necessary to look at so many multitude of sources, right, of data. And in many cases, we see that the institutions are not really aware of the value proposition of a specific data until much later. So there is this need to be able to collect, even though you may not be able to make a case for it immediately. And I think that's also something that institutions are waking up to as a possibility. Historically, there's been this trend towards let me collect only what I need to report on. But now it's moved towards, like what Harsh was saying, more indicative patterns which might not be immediately obvious, but we would need to collect it in the case that 6 months later we get to have this bright idea for which we might need this historical perspective as well.
The digital transformation journey, different organizations are at different stages. But surely a 360-degree customer perspective, a view, would be something that was really worth aspiring for. And one would say, yeah, we have reached some kind of milestone or landmark in the digital transformation journey. What is it more an issue of data quality or data quantity or something else that you think is more critical?
So I think, okay, first of all, I think the biggest thing is that 360 degree is no longer a destination, it's a journey. Okay, because the way or the pace in which data is, sort of adding up, every new application that you launch or every new investment that you make in terms of digital produces more data. Okay. And we are also proactively now, I think some of the other panelists as well spoke about the fact that, it makes sense to get data and collect it, even though you don't exactly have an immediate end use for it. So I have also seen something similar happening at our end as well. And we typically have a lot of investments happening now in even collecting and gathering data. Because there is a conviction that, one, this data by itself would be valuable, or second, this data is seen as part of a larger data ecosystem, where for all the rest of my data to make sense, this data element is critical.
Okay.
So either way, I think one, there is a lot of focus on, collecting data, preparedness to make investments to collect data. Okay. So I think that's something that we are seeing, and that's why I'm saying that the 360 degree is therefore become a journey, right? So even if I have achieved a certain stage today in 360 degree, I always have a go-to state that I'm aspiring towards, and that go-to state also will evolve as I keep adding new applications and new data sources become viable, okay, or the readiness to become investments, use cases emerge. So I think this has been something that we have experienced. Also, I think another thing, there's an excellent point that you made that, there are different stages of digital transformation and organizations are often in different stages. But, I think another interesting thing that I'd like to share is even different parts of an organization can be in different stages of digital transformation at the same time. Okay. And that also is something that, happens. And in a way, it's great because it creates precedents. It creates case studies within the organization for other teams and units to pick up. And those are much more relatable even than looking at case studies from outside, maybe other organizations, etc. Because people say, hey, if it can happen here, then, why can't it happen for my team? So I think that's another interesting thing that's happening as well, within the organization. And COVID has definitely accelerated this.
Okay. To add on to what you said, to extend the discussion slightly, you mentioned that organizations are willing to invest in data acquisition and there's a cost. But who in the organization? Because if there are 5 or 10 different business units, how is that cost distributed, or it's distributed all across? Is there a standard way, or each organization does it differently from what you understand?
So I would say that typically it's, you're absolutely right. So what happens is that typically it's maybe one or, few business units that come together that see value in the data and then they start investing. Okay. And then slowly over a period of time, as there are other units as well that start, kind of adopting this data or using this data, they as well jump into the bandwagon. But definitely there has to be one unit which starts, and that is that is also sort of complementing the point that I made earlier on different levels of digital transformation existing at the same time within an organization. Yeah.
Correct.
So yeah. So that's how we have seen our journey evolving.
I like to paraphrase.
It's a challenge. Yeah.
Paraphrase what you said in the first part and see if it makes sense. So if I can say, according to Shivani, 361 is the new 360. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it and a nice catchphrase as well. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's come to Vinod. If you can share how you see quality and quantity of data or some other aspect as a part of a 360-degree vision, customer perspective.
Thank you, Manoj, and other panelists. I think for the digital transformation journey, we need to consider the past, maybe some 5 to 10 years time, how and where we were from a data perspective and where we stand today as an industry. Actually, not only from a BFSI, but NBFC also, where we stand and how we are actually looking at the data, how much actually quantity and quality we are looking at to take any of the decisions. So if you look at, I'm just specifying to the banking side of it, maybe some 5 years back or 3 years back, it was more of the physical document which became the KYC. And KYC has hundreds of data which is having, and we capture all the data and multiple analysis actually used to do that. And I'm going to the digressing bit from only from a usage perspective, but I'm coming to the misuse of this data also. If you look at rural area, prior to the digital transformation, even though it is happening today also, because we are not 100% digital transformed, but a lot of frauds used to happen on the data. To give an example, maybe in a small Gram Panchayat, the Gram Panchayat head used to be the person who is actually controlling almost everything.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe he is opening hundreds of accounts on the name of some of the people. You sign here, people sign it. People sign it and he opens the account. When a government, any of the allowances or any of the helping, this Gram Panchayat head used to get the entire money because he knows that money never actually goes to the right people. So we have the data, the quantity of data there, but the quality was not there, or the right person was not actually getting the right amount or the kind of benefit he should be getting. So from there, after the Aadhaar enabled system came, so the major transformation which has happened in the bank, especially in the banking industry, when the AEPS started, a lot of changes actually happened there also. Even though fraud is happening there today on multiple ways, but a major transformation we could see because that authentication is there, and the right money or right person was actually getting the benefit of anything which is coming. The number of frauds that used to happen got reduced. And the people are able to go to any place, any of the location, and actually with his fingerprint, he is able to operate his account. That became a major change happened in almost across India, especially in a rural area, because Fino is actually 80% we work in the rural area. The kind of frauds and supports and the enablement which we can feel from the root itself. And the adoption of this entire digital being very fast, and the people take it. Even though you go to any of the village in any state where the train is not there or the bus is not going, the people need to walk for 3-4 hours to reach somewhere. There also the people actually digital savvy now, because a lot of changes happen. They need to use their fingerprint. They understand how the entire thing is been working. So what we achieve is may not be the entire 360 degree, what we used to call the 360 view of a person, means the entire thing, his address to his income to his all other thing, information needs to be there to process a data or to open an account. That is changed from there, that only his fingerprint is required to open an account. So that whether the 360 degree view is really required from that perspective is there or not, I don't know. And without that, actually, can we use this patterns, the way he is using the account or his Aadhaar enablement, Aadhaar usage, whether that can be used to derive at many of the data requirements or many of the other solutions that we can build. So that is also we started, because we don't get, it's not mandatory to get all his entire personal data or family data to have account opening. So it's very simple now. So, a major transformation happened because of the digital part of it. Now, another transformation part I could see that earlier that a bank needs to have a branch somewhere. The people go to the branch and do their activity, or they were fully dependent on branch. That is actually changed. Now, if you look at Fino's focus, we don't have much branches. We are not focusing on branches. As on today, we have about 200,000 active merchants across India, and we are looking at almost 500,000 merchants to be built by this year, next year. So the account from a customer perspective, any transaction which he require, it is available to merchant. Be it account opening, a money withdrawal, money deposit, fund transfer, you name it. It is insurance. Everything is with the So the digital transformation actually made another step where people doesn't have to depend on particular branch or particular area, but they can go to any of the merchant who is active, who has the capability to manage their micro ATM and digital devices, who is integrated with the AEPS, manage the entire requirement of the customer. So here, that differentiation factor again starting from the data available. So we capture the data of a merchant, we capture the data of kind of people coming, and you also capture the kind of transaction they do, the amount they do, the multiple data points we get from each and every customer. We also get where this customer is actually transacting from. Some of them are migrants. They go from UP to Bihar or Bihar to Kerala or Rajasthan or wherever they are going. So we get the pattern. Where this person and how much he normally transfer, how much he normally withdraw, the family withdraw, so many things. So rather than actually capturing the entire other thing, we do make a sense out of this kind of data. This is actually dependent upon the quantity and the quality. The quantity we need to have some kind of because only one transaction we may not be able to make out what that customer is required.
So it's very interesting the way you said that you don't need lots and lots of data. You just need for certain kind of transactions just the basic data like a Aadhaar or a fingerprint or biometric or something. Let me come to Vimal, and maybe Vimal, you can share light. How do you see data being managed in a very difficult, in a very kind of challenging scenario?
Right.
You just don't put it on a hard disk and leave it.
So to counter that, let me solve the security question first. It's very difficult to steal data from Snowflake. We have some of the largest banking customers who are very, very highly regulated, who are big users of Snowflake, including some of the largest like Capital One Bank, for example. Okay. And from our perspective, the way we look at a 360-degree view of the customer and how people like Snowflake can come in, we've seen two very key trends which have been shifting in the last maybe 5 to 6 months. I think to Shivani's point, COVID has accelerated a lot of understanding and necessity for customers to move on this journey. The one singular point I'd like to point out is for a lot of customers have started realizing they can't have data silos. When you talk about quantity of data, if you truly want to create a 360-degree view of a customer, data needs to reside in one single location. You can't have 20 different data sets on different points in time where you truly, if you're trying to do any kind of analysis on customer spend, cross-sell, upsell opportunities, analyze fraud, risk, or anything of that sort, data should be centralized in a single location, which is where people like us, like Snowflake, will come and help people consolidate all your data sets into a single platform. The second, again, to echo Shivani's point as well, is data acquisition today is super critical. People have started realizing that any kind of data that you acquire today may not be relevant in 2020, but in 2022 or 23, when you merge it with different other data sets that are available at that point in time, they could be an invaluable tool for an organization to have that competitive edge. And again, we've also seen from Snowflake's perspective, we're truly trying to see how we can enable this data exchange and the data economy going, where lots of customers can now start sharing data securely between each other to enrich their own data sets. So for example, a healthcare provider sharing data with a life insurance service provider, of course, within all the privacy laws and all the controls, and try and see how we can arrive at pricing models specific for specific customers. So these are some of the examples where data enriching can happen across different organizations, across various industries as well. So these are the two key changes we're seeing at least in the last 5 to 6 months.
How does that having a 360-degree vision, and maybe even a 360 division is a journey for data also. So can you share your perspectives on having this view and how it helps?
Sure. So I think to Vimal's point on centralizing data, that's a journey which we as an organization started quite some time ago. I think we recognize the fact that centralizing a lot of disparate data sources was crucial for future use. I also agree with both Shivani and Vimal's point on store data now and figure out use cases over a period of time, because implementing use cases does take its own time. Building real-time intelligence on top of data is also not an easy task. So being able to to historical information, being able to pre-cook certain recommendations and put it out there for the digital layer to actually prompt the customer. All of these models are being tried and tested across the industry. Some of the large players in the e-commerce ecosystem do it so well, and we are kind of experienced that firsthand. So I think a lot of the BFSI sector has a lot to aspire to move towards that level of being able to give real-time recommendations based on the past information, being able to analyze the unstructured data coming from multiple sources, whether it's social media or whether it is images, files, whatever it may be, and also to understand location-specific, customer-specific data to create a persona understanding of that customer. I think that's something which we would love to see evolve much more in the banking sector. And that said, each persona would love to have a unique, hyper-personalized experience. So I think the way a millennial would like to engage with their bank and the way a senior citizen would like to engage with their bank are two very different experiences. So that is something which we are working very actively towards. Yes, the recent press release that you spoke about is one of the platforms that we have recently invested in to look at digitizing certain processes when it comes to moving from paper to paperless. So it's just another lever in the number of projects we have undertaken to move to a digital, paperless, presence-less, and now contactless kind of ecosystem. I'd also just like to add one point with COVID, the kind of intensity that we have seen increase on digital platforms has now made it very clear that it's a primary channel for a bank. It's not a secondary channel anymore. Without digital, it's very difficult for an organization to survive out there. And we have seen a combination of factors that have resulted in this. One is digital payments being made so easy to execute in the offline ecosystem with the use of QR codes. On the online ecosystem, multiple new payment methods have actually risen very sharply, allowing a lot of data to get collected from all of these payment transactions. So a lot of these initiatives, whether it is payment related or whether it is a product centric, have actually come together. It's a very unique time that we have in front of us to make sense out of all this and to build innovative use cases on top of it.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Let me extend the same point to Harsh. Harsh, what you described earlier was more of customer acquisition using alternate data. But once you have acquired a customer and you have acquired all this data and you're continuing to acquire data, what do you do more with it?
Conversations going in a very interesting way because I'm finding that we're having some of the more sort of formal economy participants, and I would classify Bert maybe slightly more on the formal economy side, and Vinodji is coming from a very rural sort of payment side, and I think we at Magma are somewhere right in the middle of both of this. And I want to just maybe make a comment, just tying up all of this. You see, digital transformation, the way we look at it, is actually marking a radical rethinking of how an organization uses technology, people, and process. But basically, the idea is to fundamentally change business performance. And at the heart of all of this, I think, is business intelligence, which is where data, comes in. So what we found in our experience is that we also implemented a CRM, which enabled us to give some level of a 360-degree view, or a very rudimentary level of 360 view to start with. But what we found is even after displaying, let's say, a cross-sell offer, on our CRM, omni-channel, so, across various customer interactions to our field force, we found that the cross-sell, didn't really, skyrocket, didn't really jump up. And the reason was that we hadn't really changed the behavior of the employees, after launching, the platform. So on the other hand, when we started gamifying the entire experience and, sort of incentivizing the whole, incentivizing cross-sell, incentivizing how do you understand the offer that is being populated, and then running the training programs and running, sort of challenge the champion and train the trainer kind of programs, that's when we really saw the cross-sell really exploding in the organization. So, you mentioned about how are we using data after a customer is onboarded. What we've started to do is, again, going with what Vimal was saying, earlier our collection data system and our loan underwriting data system were actually two separate platforms altogether. Okay. After building a data warehouse, we actually built a risk data mart and a cross-sell data mart. And then we linked the two together such that in real time, as customers are paying their EMIs, depending on how many days they are delayed or whether they're paying before time and so on and so forth, the cross-sell offers would get populated, and every interaction that we're doing with our customer was being used as a cross-sell opportunity, which we then gamified through incentive structures for our field force, to the point where now, over a 1.5 year period, we have, increased our cross-sell by 4 times to the same customer. And because we onboard customers who are new to credit or thin file, it is much easier for us to, give a repeat loan to a customer than to give a fresh loan to a new customer, because the analysis required is significantly higher for a new customer, onboarding. But that's just the point I want to make is that, combining the 360-degree view with the digital transformation actually involves a behavior change on the ground. And that to us was actually more difficult, than just the data piece of it. The data was absolutely required, and we couldn't have done this transformation without the data, but the data wasn't sufficient. There was a lot of other things that were required to actually enable transformation on the ground. And I think the more informal you get, the more there's possibly human elements that are still required, where, customer self-assist journeys, may not be as effective as customer assisted journeys, where the effort is required. And that's where, again, the need for bolstering through incentivization and gamification, became more important.
That's a very interesting example. And I want to take this down to Rangarajan with the same perspective. What do you see? What are your learnings in terms of what data was expected to deliver, and what actually was delivered in the real world? Can you give us that overall perspective?
Yeah, certainly. In fact, we would like to start with the rudimentaries, which is that ultimately data is just a proxy for business. And what matters is whether the business is working at its top-notch efficiency, bringing in new sources of revenue, or controlling for costs. And that's really what the root of the business is. And data can at the best be only a proxy. Like, it can tell you what is happening, and it can potentially inform you what could be done in the future. But because it's just a proxy, there are layers of interpretation that are required in order for it to make sense or be made sense of in the context of a specific business case. And that's where we see a lot of innovation happening. And it's towards that we've also engineered a platform called Cadence.ai. It's geared towards making sure that these layers of interpretation, which are typically the source of, I would say, frustration or loss in translation kind of a problem in many enterprises, those are minimized. And AI can play a very critical role there in short-circuiting the process. That's number one. And secondly, in interpreting from these proxies aspects which are very hard for humans to see, because the scale at which you have to deal with processing is not something that a human sitting in the back office would be able to do as easily, whereas algorithms which are cutting edge can potentially get to that answer much faster. And the third part of it is the ethics and the prejudices that are typically there in a human making a decision, as opposed to an algorithm which can be set up to be consistent, which can be set up to be objective. But even there are aspects around biases that need to be taken care of. But at least I would say there is more hope in being able to build a process around ensuring fairness in the entire decision making. So I would say AI plays a role for all three of these in making sure that these proxies are correctly interpreted for the business outcomes that need to be delivered.
That's interesting. And how does an organization, let's say a bank or NBFC or insurance, how does it verify that the kind of work that AI is doing is actually, in that sense, fairer or does not have biases? Or are there ways to test it apart from going out in the real world?
There are. But the long and short of it is that it wouldn't be completely possible to just use automated testing methods for evaluating fairness. You would need real world inputs and feedback as well. But a lot of the aspects around biases can actually be captured at the point of, for instance, model evaluation itself. And there are actually cutting edge techniques that are being deployed, which are focused on explaining the outcomes of AI. But those are fairly, I would say, not ready for prime time or industrial use. It's something that's picked up in the last 6 months. But even before that, I would say the basis for what AI has to do is also anchored in having a governed, traceable data store, right? Because ultimately you're depending on the same proxies, and that is not going away anytime soon. So you would need that in place as step zero, even before you can talk about AI's fairness or automated testing for the ethics side of it.
Got it. I want to come to Vimal with a issue about cost.
Yeah.
In the sense with the data of all kinds, data growing in velocity, volume, and variety.
Yeah.
How do you keep costs under control?
Great question.
And if you can give the technological and the non-technological perspective.
Sure. I'll first give the non-technological answer and then slightly pivot towards technology. Number one, I think I'll break it down to two parts, right? One is for an organization to have the intent to change, which means the intent to understand and appreciate that data truly can transform the business, right? That's the first part. The minute there is intent to change, which means you're willing to break down barriers, you're willing to mix and merge teams together, empower people to take decisions truly based on data, then it moves into, like I said earlier, how can I get a single source of truth? Now, to your point, absolutely, the kind of velocity, volume, variety of data which is coming in, it's no longer terabytes, we're talking petabytes now. So we're talking petabytes. There are some of our largest customers who are holding 67 to 80 petabytes of data in one single source of truth. Having said that, how do you define cost is the first parameter, right? I can store possibly an exabyte of data without issue, but what defines cost? It's not just the cost of storing the data. What am I doing with that data? What are the use cases that I'm enabling for revenue generating opportunities or cost optimization routes, right? And the second thing is, if an organization is to build a TC or a total cost of ownership over a 3, 5, 7 year period, it's very important to understand what are you doing today. Now, you can't compare what you're doing today to what's going to come 5 years from now, because there's a very high chance you're pretty much doing nothing today. And this, I'm speaking at a generic level, but 3 to 5 years from now, you truly would be, I think, harnessing pretty much all the data which exists in your organization, which you might not be doing today. So the cost might grow up 5x, but if you do the right analysis to see what impact it has to do with your revenue and reduction in cost, it could be in way more magnitude of 5x, and the ROI could be maybe a year or two as well. So that's what I've seen in practical examples.
Okay.
And on a technology aspect, I think the first thing I would say is organizations to embrace the public cloud. Now, that's one thing where the cost is going to be a super critical component. No matter what we say and do, it's very difficult to maintain the efficiencies of a truly on-demand kind of an infrastructure, where today, let's say you have a petabyte of data and you pay for that petabyte of data. Tomorrow, you don't want to analyze a petabyte, you move it down to only 100 terabytes of data, you only pay for that 100 TB. So you're literally paying for the usage of that data, not simply storing the data forever and not using it. So embracing the public cloud would be one of the best ways for organizations to truly understand and maintain cost as well.
So this sounds like, using Uber, Ola versus buying a car for yourself. You pay only for what you use.
But with all the security protocols built in, possibly virtual armed escorts along with the Ola and Uber's coming with you in the form of, triple digit encryption, bring your own encryption keys and things like that.
Let me come to Vijay Kumarji. If we can have your perspective on these issues that we've just discussed, in terms of cost, in terms of using artificial intelligence, like Rangarajan described. What do you see as the insurance sector moving ahead?
Unfortunately, the insurance industry is somewhat, or maybe sector is at somewhat disadvantage compared to other sectors. For example, every company has a huge database, but quality is always issue because our business generally depend on we source business through intermediary and mostly agents and dealers and brokers. And the policies are renewable after 1 year. So generally, the quality of data that insurance company get, I think, is not good enough to have 360, which can be used as in the 360. So basically, insurance industry still is at maybe 50-60 degree rather than 380 degree actually. So the see other is, I think, for customers to for insurance company and a customer KYC is not mandatory. So insurance companies cannot force the customer to give the complete information, and there is some apprehension obviously because of the nature of business. The customer also would not like to give too much of information so that it creates a problem at the time of underwriting or claims at later stage. So while the insurance, non-life insurance actually need the database 380 degree view, I think more than anybody else, because we are running a risk. So we require the need is much more, but the availability is much lesser actually compared to other sectors. But of late, I think in the given constraint, I think the companies have done well. Some support has come from the government side also. Lot of data repositories are there. For example, now Vahan is ready to share information with the insurance companies about the vehicles in limited manner. Now, National Health Authority actually also is planning. You might have heard in the news recently that the Health Ministry is coming out with some common platform where the information about the health of each individual actually will be available, and companies or maybe still it is not decided, but I hope in the near future the insurance company will be able to access some of the information, necessary information.
Okay.
Yeah. So in these some action is happening already, and in whatever data we have, we trying to refine it. We are trying to, first of all, another biggest problem is on the warehousing side. For new companies, obviously like ours, we are fully on 100% on cloud. So for us, it is not a major issue, but the traditional companies who had used various systems and their own sites within the house are, I think, very difficult for them to transform the entire where they can use the 380 degree 360 degree view actually of that. So but in the whatever is available, I think some action is already happening. I can give you some example. In travel insurance, there is a product where if the flight is delayed beyond 75 minutes, the claim automatically travels without even customer asking this. So this has happened because some information is available from the airline side, and which has been integrated with the insurance company's policy data. And based on that, the claim triggers, and customer is not aware of the claim, but customer is intimated through SMS that claim has happened, and the claim is automatically paid without any manual intervention. Even in the motor claim or motor underwriting, for example, pre-enrollment inspection is a key issue for insurance industry. Before they write risk, they need to inspect the premises, they need to inspect the motor vehicle. So some amount of AI is being used in these and thanks to this video streaming, etc., people are extensively using. So real-time information is taken from the customers through video streaming, and based on that the pricing, etc., is done. So the progress is happening definitely, and considerable progress is happening. But our constraints are, as I mentioned, and through from regulator side, I think another one major issue that we have today, which we need to tide over, is, for example, even if we have a 360 degree view of the customer available with us, now can we sell something which adds value over and above the insurance? That we are not permitted. Okay, so we can only sell insurance against insurance, which anyway the agent is doing actually, and with limited information, we still don't have the complete view of the customers. So there are somewhat regulatory issues also there. But I hope this the more the industry is involved, more other sectors start cooperating. The government also support. I think for insurance industry also this issue will not be, it'll be positive actually going forward. Yeah.
So let's combine my last two questions: business continuity planning and lessons learned from COVID. How do you see data and processes around data? So it's not just data, but data and processes around data that leverage this data.
So I think it's a big learning for almost all the organization, irrespective of it is a banking or non-banking functioning organizations, because the kind of BCP people used to put, the organization used to put, actually taken a complete turn while the COVID impact happened. So we planned for one BCP location, two BCP locations maybe. But suddenly the requirement actually totally changed, and the BCP, a specific location is not going to work. So people need to be actually working on wherever they are, however they are, the data needs to be accessed. So it becomes a fundamental of information security that on the availability of the data and the accessibility of the data on a need basis needs to be there in place at any point of time. So that is a change actually happened from the earlier BCP planning and the current BCP planning.
Right.
So this also, if you look at that actually.
Describe the people aspect. What about the process aspect?
So the process, I was about to come to on the processes actually put in place is primarily how to access the data from a particular location or in a particular scenario. That has been changed to a global open process where any scenario which is coming, that needs to be addressed. The process being changed accordingly. So that is one is the organizational process that got changed, and we need to see another angle to the banking sector. The regulator used to see the entire process totally different. So maybe just before March 22nd, the regulators used to have that restrictions or maybe the kind of process and policy they put in place that this cannot be done out of premises. But when the scenario came, the policymakers also allowed us many of the processes to change. They said they also got to know that there's no way to do it. So suddenly, a single day, the entire process got changed. The view about the process also got changed, and many things which were not permitted for ages, suddenly that become available for the organization to look into. So that actually helped the organization not only from a BCP perspective, but more from a cost-effective and managing the entire operation perspective. So I think it's going to change a lot. Maybe during this work from home and remote, we can see a lot of process change and policy changes coming in place.
Shivani, what is your observation, lessons from COVID, whether cloud or any other things that were earlier, at least for the banking sector, not very preferred option or conservative option. Is that changing post-COVID?
See, I think to be very frank, as a bank that has basically been very digital, oriented, because we started, if you look at the history of RBL Bank, we kind of started this whole bank transformation journey about, 8 years back. And then there was always a sort of, orientation to go digital first. Okay, that was there right from the start. Of course, the bank has a, legacy of, more than 75 years, and we had to take that along. Okay. But I think, even before COVID, RBL has had a cloud orientation, a digital orientation, a partnership orientation, and all of that. But I think what has happened, very interestingly, from a process, people, technology perspective, is that what happens is we are often in BAU, right? We have a lot of goals to achieve. We have a lot of, priorities to close. Okay. So in the BAU, a lot of things, cannot be picked up immediately because they will slow down the speed at which you're progressing, right? So certain things have to be taken up very cautiously or very slowly or, happen in a, calibrated manner. Now, what COVID did was it just pressed a reset button. Okay. I think almost everybody on the panel will agree with me that nothing that they have done was something that, or 80% of what they've done today is probably stuff that they've discussed. Okay, but said that, hey, we can't do this now. This project is on priority, or, business, could slow down a bit. We can't afford it. So basically, there was a lot of, business imperatives that we were running with. And, because of that, certain things had to be done at a certain pace, right? That is what I think has completely, provided an opportunity in a way through COVID. where we could say that, hey, this is the new normal. Now you have to work from home. Now you have to access data in a certain way. You have to adopt certain tools. Managers have to, manage teams in a certain way. Data has to be accessed in a certain way. So then we have just accelerated that journey.
Okay.
So that's how I see that COVID has sort of given us an opportunity to pause the BAU and do certain things that probably we, could not do in the regular scheme of things, right? From a regulatory perspective, I think they've always had the guidelines, right? There is a risk reward. When you adopt certain guidelines, you're the first person to do it. You have to put in place certain monitoring. So suddenly the cost benefit became favorable.
Okay.
Right. I mean, because there's no other way to do it, right? This is the only way to do it. We'll do it, right? So I think that is what COVID has presented. It's presented a sort of inflection point, and it's great in a way for people in this space, who are trying to do digital transformation, who are trying to, get data adopted more widely in the organization. It's an opportunity, and I think now more than ever, I see people coming to me. So every business I work with, for example, has told me, hey, can you tell me what's been the impact of COVID? What's been the sort of, COVID is a data black hole for them. So they really want to understand the impact of COVID on their business. They want to see what, the trends are going forward, and every business in their own way, right? So I think that's another very, very interesting thing. And they are basically relying on data more than ever because they feel they're flying blind now. Okay, because then what do? You go to the data guys. Because all your trusted wisdom, all your years of experience is now being questioned.
That's true.
So that's another very, very interesting thing that has happened, is what I would say.
Yeah, no one has experience to say that I've done 10 years in a pandemic. I'm the expert.
Yeah. Exactly. So there's a reliance on data like never before. Not just to steer them out of the current, but also predict the future to a large extent. Yes. So I think that's another very, very interesting thing. As far as regulators are concerned, they have always, at least on the banking side, in different use cases, I've always seen external data, encouragement to, start using external data, bringing in more data, invest in data. And I think, those things continue to be there. And now more than ever, those things continue to be there, right? Because of the COVID. The other thing is now we are also worried about, moratoriums. We are worried about, how the economy will recover, what could be the sort of impact on various sectors, their ability to repay. So therefore, again, it's in a way given a lot of impetus to use a lot of this alternate data because again, how would you predict?
That's where the answer is, correct.
Yes. So I think that's what COVID has done, that it has really, one, given us a reset moment. Okay. And second, it has basically made us much more reliant on data because all decades old wisdom is now being questioned.
So do you see banks adopting the kind of technologies or technology strategies that big tech have adopted? Or do you see them framing their own strategic approach to technology? What do you say, Bertrand?
Interesting question. I think part of it I did answer and touch on before, saying some of the large e-com companies, the way they use recommendations and nudges is something that we obviously have to learn from and aspire to build some of that intelligence in our own digital kind of experiences for our customers. Second, learning from some of those entities that you spoke about is the ability to personalize and again, hyper personalize the experience depending on the persona. So like how you have a separate kind of a curated channel for kids, you have a separate curated channel for, grown-ups. Content itself for companies like them is built for different personas and different customer segments. So I think that's something which as an industry, we need to really take some learnings from and find ways, intelligent ways of implementing that in our own space. The other interesting piece that you asked about is how do we look at, some of this transformation across the bank? I think part of it is already there and underway. So today, a lot of the channel transformation that has happened over the years where we have one of the best mobile banking apps in the market right now, has been a result of some of that effort. So I think we continue to endeavor to do more on this particular track, and I would love to see in years to come us giving a serious, competitive advantage to the banks itself of
Okay.
keeping customers ring-fenced within the bank ecosystem. So today, consumption of content could also start originating from within the bank's ecosystem. I see this as a potential trend that may also emerge in time to come.
Bert is talking today, Harsh, about more kinds of content going from the organization to the customer. And earlier you talked about more kinds of information coming from the outside world into the organization. What is your perspective on this new digital transformation, which is content going out to engage with customers? So social media is, of course, the best example of content being used to engage customers. Do you see financial organizations engaging customers through content in a bigger way?
I actually completely agree with Bert. I think, Manoj, the digital economy is moving very much towards platform businesses. And I think, whether you look at Amazon, whether you look at Google, you look at pretty much anyone, the idea is how do you pick up more and more data from the customer? If you make it a purely transactional relationship, then you have to acquire the customer, market to the customer every time you want to pick up data and take a decision. But if you can create a relationship with the customer where you're providing useful information, whether it is content, whether it is services, whether it is partnerships with other companies, whatever else, if you can engage with the life of the customer digitally, then you're constantly exchanging data. You're providing some content, in the process, you're also getting some data back, making some decisions, then providing some more value back to the customer. So for example, let's talk about a truck lending company. We also have a truck lending business. If we're able to provide, let's say, through partnerships with, fuel sort of petrol pumps or diesel, pumps on the highways, and we're able to provide nice prices to the truck drivers, or if you're able to provide through partnerships, tire changing facilities, or loans on tire changing facilities, that's then an application the truck driver might want to keep on his phone, because it's actually his life. So I think I'm not sure if Bert exactly was meaning this, but I think the idea is you got to engage with your customer more and more, in the process exchanging more and more content and data with each other to be able to add more value to the customer's life. The other thing I would say is, Manoj, if you look at Amazon today, I think most big tech organizations are also scared of Amazon, and that may be partly the reason why their market cap is where it is and the way it's growing. Because you see, Amazon today has become the face of the business. The SME who's actually providing the product on the marketplace today is an unknown entity to the end user who's actually buying the product. And this is something that the digital platform economy has really created, right? It's created this flywheel where if you're not on the platform, you are unknown to the customer. Because today, when we go search for products online, we don't go to the individual website of the manufacturer. We actually just go to the marketplace. So I think financial organizations will also need to figure out ways to integrate with platforms so that they are constantly engaging with the customer base, and in the process providing data and getting data back from the customer.
Correct. Great. Thanks. Vimal, if we take up the technical part of this, I mean, how an organization can provide tons and tons of content and create value in the process. How do you see your kind of company adding to that?
So since we are Snowflake is a cloud data platform company, so obviously I love watching Prime Video, but we don't provide videos at all. But having said that, what we can do, and we have helped a lot of customers, is helping them actually publish data which they can actually monetize in a data exchange of sort. For example, we call it the data marketplace. So Snowflake has a data marketplace where, let's say, as a bank or any kind of financial institution or any vertical for that matter, if there is data you would like to share with internal to the organization or external to third-party customers or regulators, for example, or even move to the final frontier saying, I want to make money out of the data that I have, of course, within all the privacy controls and everything else, you can now publish this in the Snowflake data marketplace. Other customers of Snowflake can now look and see if they can enrich their own data sets with the data sets that other organization is providing. Subscribe to, if it's free, it'll just freely flow inside. If it is paid, then there's a paid model. Then that company starts making money from their own internal data generated. Obviously, this is done in a super secure manner. Data never leaves anyone's premise at all. But this is what I said earlier, right? We're trying to enable the data economy or the data marketplace.
Oh, so you're going back to the 3D economy that we
Exactly.
started with. Perfect. Okay, last person, if I may, I think Rangarajan is, we haven't spoken to for a while. Rangarajan, what is your perspective on the data economy? And very briefly, please.
Sure, yeah. We help companies build the pipelines that are required for them to make the most of it. So the pipelines have to be in place before you can start to have the people inside the house. So make sure you get the right plumbing, the right pipelines, the right architecture in place, and make sure you have the tooling in place and with Snowflake Cloud Data Platform, with Cadence as the customer intelligence platform built on top of it. That will be my suggestion.
Okay.
I think some companies, including our company, actually try to learn from these big companies, online platform companies. There are two things, because we only sell piece of paper, and we have some risk associated. So the transaction generally is very painful for insurance customers.
Yes.
So I think there is some learning. We tried mobile insurance with certain online platform, and Julie insurance with certain Julie companies. So I think a lot of learning happened, and I'm sure industry will learn from them. Where instantly the entire transaction happened with respect to underwriting and claims, and the communication also is pretty clear and fast, which is again a bottleneck for the insurance industry.
Absolutely.
So I think that also some development happening, innovation and evolution happening on that front.
Great. Thank you all. Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you to the lady, Shivani, for being a valuable participant in this discussion.